In a mass drone attack on airfields across Russia, Ukraine has successfully destroyed Russian strategic bombers in what is being called one of the most successful Ukrainian strikes against Russia's strategic aviation of the war so far. Multiple Russian Tupolev Tu-95 strategic bombers have been set ablaze. Ukraine's security service spent over 18 months planning this large-scale Operation Web, a stealth operation that struck several air bases housing Russian strategic aircraft. These drones were concealed under remote control roofs on trucks. Videos show Ukraine drone swarms coming out of trucks and attacking Russia's fleet of strategic bombers. 4 air bases deep inside Russia were struck with a coordinated attack with up to 40 planes being destroyed completely, including a long-range bomber as well. Now, according to source-based reports, the attack took over 1.5 years almost to execute and was personally supervised by the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, this operation saw drones transported in containers. What this operation, the Operation Web, how it was all planned and how is it that it has shocked Russia? So it was planned by Ukraine's security service. It took about 18 months, we're told. Drones, cabins were secretly delivered to Russia. So imagine that while all of this was being carried, those who were carrying it, the truck drivers, were not even aware of what they were carrying. But they contained drones. They contained these cabins secretly being delivered to Russia. These drones were in fact concealed under the roofs of these cabins. So there were cabins and there were drones that were placed right inside it. So it was all concealed. These cabins were in fact later mounted on these trucks, and then at the signal, the roofs opened. They opened remotely. Dozens of drones then launched from these trucks. These drones then struck strategic bomber aircraft. Now, this is how the attack took place. In this as well, you can see the hidden FPV drones exploding. In fact, in response, Russia has pounded Ukraine with missiles and drones, killing at least 2 in the Kherson and Donetsk areas. Russian troops have in fact launched some 109 drones and 5 missiles across Ukraine. So that's a response that has come in as well. And in fact, Ukraine has also spoken about this attack, and Zelensky has also congratulated the security forces on the same. Russia has currently responded, but this has, of course, escalated concerns on what will happen next at a time when there are talks taking place. It may not have seen much of a movement as far as the ceasefire talks are concerned, but there have been talks that are taking place. What does it mean with Ukraine striking deep inside Russia? Shrinder, you know, it raises several questions on the ceasefire or the peace talks, but more importantly, it raises several questions on how warfare will be in the future. This is completely unprecedented, the way Ukraine has taken these drones deep inside Russia and ensured heavy damages to multiple aircraft of Russia.
First of all these attacks have been in almost the farthest corners of Russia, and it's a big country, Russia. Murmansk is near the North Pole. Amur is in the Siberian region. Irkutsk is also hundreds of miles away from the front. So there is also a question about Russian border controls. They should have been stopped at the border, ideally for Russia. Secondly, the Russians have said that there have been no loss of life. But nevertheless, these videos tell you very clearly that there has been enormous damage, particularly of aircraft. Expensive bomber aircraft have been damaged. The fact that this has been planned with so much detail and so much efficiency, these trucks, as you rightly said, went all the way towards airfields in distant parts of Russia, hundreds of miles away from the front. How they got there, and then just at the right time, these drones were launched and they attacked expensive aircraft, bomber aircraft, military aircraft. And that has been a huge effort by the Ukrainians, and very successful from what we see in the pictures. Yes, there has been no loss of life, and that's very, very positive. But regardless of that, you see the damage that has been caused. Now, as far as the talks are concerned, the war has gone on for over 3 years. It's nearly 3.5 years. And at this point, there seems to be no end in sight because Russia and Ukraine are saying different things about, especially about territory concern. Who controls, if there is a ceasefire right now, who will control the territory, the Ukrainian territory that Russia currently has? And that includes the Crimea. So about that, there is no agreement between the two countries. The one agreement that has happened, and thankfully that does seem a positive one, is the fact that there has been an exchange of prisoners. So 1,000 Ukrainian prisoners have gone to the Russians and vice versa. So as a result, there is some positive movement. Now, it has always been said that it's better to talk than to fight. Now, in this case, this is a case which is almost unprecedented. You're talking and you're fighting, because what both sides are trying to do are score points before a conversation to get an upper hand. Now, how successful this will be, how long the talks will go on, remains to be seen. But it's important that the talks go on, because the talks are one way that some situation, some positive situation can be arrived at. And that is the only way out. President Trump had said that this war would not have begun if he were president, and he would end it in a day. He's been president for over 100 days. But it's important that the talks go on. That's the only solution.
Absolutely. In this moment that is being called the Pearl Harbor moment for Russia, big setback for Russia, and we're going to be talking about that, but we have an official statement coming in as well. Listen in.
Щойно була доповідь голови Служби безпеки України Василя Малюка. Блискуча операція проведена на території ворога виключно проти військових цілей, проти саме тієї техніки, яка використовувалась в ударах проти України. Дуже відчутні втрати Росії і абсолютно справедливі, заслужені їхні втрати. Дякую Службі безпеки, особисто генералу Малюку, також всім, хто був задіяний в операції. Готували операцію більш ніж 1,5 роки. Планування, організація, всі деталі були.
Rishabh is also live on the broadcast with us. Just to put things in perspective, let's tell you how the attacks have taken place. Of course, the trucks going deep inside Russia to the perimeter of the air bases of Russia, after which remotely the lid is taken off, the roof of it is taken off, allowing the drones to fly out and then carry out these attacks. Completely unprecedented, the kind of attack that we are seeing. Rishabh, just a moment before I come to you, just want to introduce Pathikrit Payne as well, strategic affairs expert, joining us on the broadcast. And Mr. Pathikrit Payne, how do you see this play out? Because at a time when there are talks taking place between Russia and Ukraine, this is completely unprecedented. 18 months of planning, drones going deep inside Russia into their strategic air bases and blowing off their airplanes.
Well, tactically it is some kind of a masterstroke, but strategically it's suicidal. And it's highly unlikely that Ukraine could have executed something like this on its own. The possibility of help of other NATO allies cannot be ruled out. And somebody has just pushed Ukraine to the next level of devastation, because the retaliation that would happen from Russia, probably, which has already started through ballistic missiles, is going to be devastating. Last time in October 2024, I think the Russians tested the Oreshnik missile, multiple independent re-entry vehicle, and it was a glimpse of what kind of, apocalyptic devastation the Russians are capable of doing. I think some of these NATO members, especially the Germans, the French, the British, are literally pushing the whole of this conflict to take a shape of a European conflict, or maybe a bigger one than a European conflict. The fact that the Germans and the French have already stated that there is no range limit on the kind of missiles that the Ukrainians can now use on Russia, and this kind of sophisticated operation where I'm sure there are GPS coordinates and many other kind of tactical support were given by others. It's going to be, I would not be surprised if some of the Russian missiles, if not now immediately, at least in the recent future, drops in other European current countries or NATO countries which are actively supporting Ukraine. I have been saying it for the last 2 years that this is not a Russia-Ukraine war going on. This is a war between Russia versus NATO going on. So somewhere many of these NATO countries who are using Ukraine as a front to pin down Russia would have to pay the price. The question is whether the Germans or the French are ready if any of the missiles or some kind of a retaliation from Russia lands on their soil or not. Okay. So I think the situation is far, far more critical than what it appears. And if you look at the kind of conflict that is going on in Russia versus Ukraine for the last 3 years, this is exactly the reason why India went ahead, did Operation Sindoor, showed strategic restraint, came back because we did not want to get into this kind of an inordinate conflict that the Russians have been sucked into. This is going to have very, very devastating impact on Europe, on the world in terms of supply chain disruptions, prices of commodities going up again.
Yes.
Imagine the consequence if many of these ballistic missile retaliation by Russia, because what was attacked, the strategic nuclear bombers, their strategic assets, possibility of some of the attacks happening in the nuclear submarine bases also was also reported yesterday, though not confirmed. It is like inviting Russia to retaliate in a manner which the world may have not seen for decades. This is at a time when the war with the talks going on. It appears, a combination of Ukrainian stupidity, Trump's naivety, and some of these deep state pawns in NATO itching for a major conflict going on. Trump was the one trumpeting that he would end the war in a day. And it has been shown by what is going on that some of the major NATO members of Europe does not want this war to be over.
Okay.
So when the talks are going on,
okay.
you do some kind of this kind of action, there will be consequences.
Okay, okay, all right. Thank you for joining us with all those details and all those inputs. And Rishabh, do you agree? Because Pathikrit Payne was also talking about how this is going to be a setback for the talks, of course. And the United States president, at a time when he called Vladimir Putin crazy, called Russia's actions crazy, Ukraine going deep inside Russia and striking the air bases.
Well, the last time when Russia and Ukraine met in Istanbul, the Russian chief of this delegation, who is a senior aide to Kremlin, quoted Napoleon saying that war and negotiations should go on together. While both Russia and Ukraine were preparing yesterday for the agenda of talks today at the Istanbul table, what transpired over Sunday? First, Ukraine going ahead and hitting the 5 air bases and actually hitting 40 of their important aircrafts, the Russian aircraft. Russia responded by pounding the areas on the borderline. Further escalation is definitely expected here on Pathikrit, as he was mentioning, and this could further escalate from here onwards, given that the way Ukrainians have hit Russia deep inside its territory. The last time it happened was in October 2024, and we saw the response coming in from Russia. So a similar response is expected from Moscow for sure after these attacks, because it's not just an attack, it's an embarrassment for Moscow that after 3 years of war, Ukraine have this audacity to enter Russian territory and hit such strategic air bases, even hitting the bombers like 295 or 222 Mk3. The way things have happened in last 24 hours, yes, the planning was for long. It's been said that 18 months of planning and execution, and final the result came in yesterday. But definitely the way things have happened looks like Russia-Ukraine war is far from over right now.
Okay, all right. Russia-Ukraine war far from over. The talks are taking place. Will Russia participate or not? Srinjoy, that's going to be where all eyes are going to be. Will Russia participate in the talks or not? And what would the response of Russia be?
Russia is likely to take part in the talks because there is no gain from just breaking off the talks. Russia will be at the talks to at least say that this is our point of view, this is how we want the war to end. As far as the Russian response is concerned, well, it can be very severe because Russia has missiles, Russia has ballistic missiles. Ballistic missiles are not that easy to stop. Russia also has cruise missiles. So that kind of retaliation could happen. But what this attack actually shows, that any country with slightly porous borders is open to such attacks. And the question that Russia will have to ask is to its border security forces, their equivalent of the BSF. How could these trucks come in? Where did they come in from? Why weren't they properly searched? These are questions that the Russians will have to ask. The Ukrainians, of course, will have to prepare for very heavy attacks.
Okay.
So what all this will do is actually take the war even further.
Okay, all right. Srinjoy, thank you for joining us with those details. What happens in the talks, what happens next is going to be very, very crucial. We will continue bringing in Srinjoy as well as Rishabh for those updates. For now, slipping into a quick break here. We'll be right back to stay with us.